So now that you've had some time to experiment in a different file with this concept of extruding, we're going to apply that concept to make some simple arms for our snowman. And this term is often referred to as box modeling. Often you could call it low poly modeling as well. It's a very common technique to create very simple geometry that's very efficient. And the way that I'm going to get started with this is I'm going to start off with a cube. And the cube is going to form the basis, the kind of the foundation for the arm. Now, obviously it's way too big, so I want to take this down. So I'm going to take it down to like probably 15 centimeters in all directions, and that's relative to the scale that I'm using. And I like to kind of move it relatively close to the position that I want it to, that I want this to start, and I'll kind of model up from there. It's a really good idea to keep these models fairly vertical, and not really kind of rotate them and move them in a strange spot until we really get the hang of what's going on in Cinema 4D. So I have this cube. I'm going to make it a little bit taller along the Y, and so I'll bump this up to maybe 50 or so. I don't have any segmentation in the object, and I may want some segmentation, but in this case, I'm going to extrude all the segmentation that I need. So because I have this cube object, it's a parametric primitive, I won't be able to start extruding it until I make it editable. So with the object selected, I'm going to click on this little icon over here to convert it to a polygon object. And at this point also, I might as well just name my branch instead of cube, call it branch. Now, because I've made this object a polygon object, I can go into the component mode, and I'll grab the polygon tool. I also want to grab the live select tool, and this will give me the ability to click and drag and just kind of grab that top polygon. Now, of course, I could have zoomed in a little bit to be a little bit more precise about that, but I feel fairly confident that I can, kind of stay back a little bit. Now I need to extrude. And remember, I can get that tool from a couple of different places. I can go to Mesh, Create Tool, and I can grab the Extrusion tool. I can also choose MT or the D key. I'm going to use this method. I like to jump into the modeling view for this kind of thing because it gives me access to some other tools down here. Now we do have tabs down here, and at this point I think it's valuable to start familiarizing yourself with the things that you're seeing in these menus, just to kind of see what's there. In some cases we'll find some keywords that might be very interesting, and we'll check them out. So I see the extrude tool down here is just to the left of the extrude inner and just to the right of the bevel tool, so make sure we're just doing a standard extrude. We can also press the D key. I'll just select the icon down there. Now, remember, when it comes to these tools that modify geometry or components of our polygon object, we don't want to influence the axes the way that we've been doing, particularly when it comes to the extrusion tool, because when we use this axis tool and to click and drag, we're actually moving the thing that we have selected, not extruding. And the way the extrusion tool will work is that I'm just going to make sure my mouse is off here, away from the model and away from the axes, and I'll click and drag to the right or to the left, depending on what I want to do. And in this case, I just want to drag to the right. Now I want to include some more geometry, so I'm going to click and drag. And so this is kind of the equivalent. I could have made this style object with a cube, with vertical segmentation, and just whatever the height of this thing is, maybe it's 150 centimeters or 100 centimeters or whatever it is. I could have really created this object with the parametric primitive and then made it editable and then started to model. But it's just a different, kind of working at this, trying to figure out what I want. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make an extrusion. I'm going to keep it fairly short, this extrusion. And what I'm paying close attention to, as I zoom in here, is the size of this polygon, because I'm going to use this polygon to extrude a branch out from it, and I'll revisit that in a moment. For now, I'm just going to continue to extrude this up. Now this looks, doesn't look much like a branch right now. It looks kind of boring, but I'm gonna modify it a little bit and start to think of this in a slightly different way. Now, I want this to start to taper as I'm modeling, and I could do it now or I could do it after I model the rough shape. But while I'm here, I know that I want this this surface to be much smaller so that it starts to create that taper towards the end of the branch. And I have a couple different options. The easiest thing to do is to go to the scale tool. And just like the extrude tool, as long as I'm not using one of these axes, if I'm just over here in the negative space, if I click and drag to the left or to the right, you can see that I'm influencing the scale of this case. In this case, it's of the polygon. So now I'm going to go back to extrusion, and this is really when the quick keys come in handy. If I roll over my scale tool, I can see that the shortcut is T. So, and D is the shortcut for extrude. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the D key, I'm going to extrude, I'm going to hit the T key, and I'm going to scale. I'll hit D again, extrude that up. I'm going to navigate, and I'll hit the T key one last time and kind of scale that down. Now I do have a little bit of a glitch here that this branch down here is going to be a little bit clunky for now, but again, I'll make another pass at that in a bit. I'm going to go back to my live select tool and grab this polygon. Now because I'm only needing to select one polygon, I could have jumped right into my extrude tool, hit the D key, and just selected the polygon that I want to influence. Now I don't really have a choice because I have the polygon selected, so I'll just select it with the live select tool, hit the D key, and now I'm extruding again. So you can see I'm adding some geometry off to the side. I'll hit the T key again and scale it down, back to D. Now this time around, I want to get this surface to really start to change and start pointing in a different direction. So I kind of want to make like a fork with this. So the way I'm going to do this is I could move this up a little bit, but what I want to do is I want to change the direction of that polygon surface. So I'm going to go to rotate. And just like rotating geometry, if I grab this according to one axis and just rotate it, you can see that I'm just really changing the direction that polygon surface is pointing in. Okay, so I have that's selected. Now I'm going to hit the D key to go back to extrude, and I'll just extend that out. I'll scale that down a little bit, hit D again and extrude. I'll roll over the rotate key. The rotate key is R, that's easy to remember, that makes sense. So I'm going to R to rotate, grab it just by one axis, D to extrude, and T to scale. Okay, now that might not be the exact shape that I want, but it's a lot closer to the branch shape that I was hoping for than the cube started. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of just kind of detail to this thing. The detail that I'm going to add is I want to kind of make it a little bit longer, and the easy solution to make it longer is that I could either grab all 4 points that converge. Let me just orbit here. I want to grab either this bottom polygon, this edge loop, or all 4 of these points and just kind of move it down, not extrude it in this case. I don't think I want to extrude. I go to live select, make sure the polygon mode is selected, just select that bottom polygon, and what I'm going to do, I don't want to extrude, I want to move. I'm just going to drag that down. So I want a little bit of length for my what's soon to be a branch. But I do want to scale it a bit, so I want to continue that idea of tapering. Okay, now it feels like a little big and clunky. I want it a little bit more delicate for my snowman, but I think this will do. I think it'll be okay. Now I did the one branch that's kind of shooting off here, and it's not, I'm not very impressed. I'm not very impressed with the branch that I came up with for 2 reasons. One, I kind of want that organic quality that we created with the carrot. I want some irregular kind of forms and shapes here. But the most obvious thing that's happening here is that this geometric shape, this geometry that we created, is real cubic. It doesn't look like a branch. It doesn't have the detail in it that the carrot does. But we're going to fix that, and we're going to fix that with a few clicks of the mouse, because we have the ability to take objects and apply generators to them. What I mean by that, and in order to experiment with this tool, I'm going to jump into a new file. Before I do that, I'm fairly happy with the start of my branch. I'm going to save. I'm going to save also incrementally. I'm going to jump into a new file by choosing File New or Command N. And in order to demo this, I'm going to start off with a cube, very similar cube than I did in the previous presentation, which is a 3x3 cube. just to experiment, I'm going to go to the Live Select tool. I want to make sure that this is editable. And when I go to the component mode, now you'll see that I can see the components, even though I didn't change the display to shading with lines. Once I enter the component mode, it does kind of show me the structure of it. But I still see a lot of value in being able to see the lines of the geometry. So I'm going to change that as well. At this point, I'm just going to extrude just kind of randomly to just to select a few things and just so that I have some more complex geometry. It looks like the 9 key, although I don't do this very often. Yeah, the number 9 key is the Live Select quick key. So I'll just try to commit that to memory. But again, what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of playing with a little bit of extrusion. I'm familiarizing myself with the workflow of the tool. I want to go back to scale and rotate just to create, a little bit of modification. So I'm just picking the tools this time that I need and just really kind of playing with this. Now, I'll experiment with another technique where I'm going to extrude. I'm going to T to scale, and I'm going to scale that in, and I'm going to hit extrude again, and I'll just kind of send that back in onto itself. Okay, so I've kind of made this hollowed out kind of geometry in here, and if I push it down too far, I can just move it back up, because we can always select geometry and move it. So what I'm most interested in right now is I want to make this more of an organic looking shape. Okay, and just to demonstrate this, I'm going to extrude, rotate. Oop, I got to really I missed my axes, and you can see how crazy that rotation gets, so I'll undo that. Just want to kind of keep it registered to space. So, okay, so I have this strange looking thing. I don't even know what this is. But I want to make it look more organic. Well, we have a tool for that. And I'm going to leave the component mode of this object. The moment that we're looking at points, edges, and polygons, it's not a bad idea to go back to the model mode of the tool. And that just means that we're moving the whole model itself. Okay, now that wasn't required for this tool that I'm about to use to make it work, but just kind of less information that I have to deal with. So Cinema 4D provides some really cool generators, and there's a lot of things that we can do. Anytime we see these green icons, we have a couple of different options, and typically they'll either take existing geometry or existing visual information and modify or create geometry based on some simple assets. In this case, we want to take this model and we want to apply a subdivision surface to it. Okay, and what that is, I'll just click on this subdivision surface. Nothing happened yet because that subdivision surface is not associated with the geometry. A subdivision surface, what it will do is it will subdivide the geometry. In other words, it'll add more detail to the geometry, more information, more segmentation, but it will also curve and try to transition points and edges to a curve. So I'm going to take this cube and I'm just going to drag and drop it into the subdivision surface. Okay, and once we do that, we see that the cube object is inside this subdivision surface, and now you can see that we have this like real, more organic looking shape. Okay, and so what this is doing, when we look at this, you can see there's a whole lot more geometry that's being represented here, but it's based on this fairly simple cube. Now I can temporarily turn off this subdivision surface by clicking on the little check mark that shows up inside the object manager. That's the original shape. Inside this subdivision surface is basically smoothing it based on the geometry. So that's something we'll get a lot of use out of this. This gives us the ability to keep our geometry fairly simple, and yet we can smooth things out. Now I'm going to select this cube. I'm going to go back into the polygon mode. And you can see I can still influence and affect. I'm just moving at this point. And I could still extrude if I want to in this mode of subdivision surfaces. This is just a generator. So this is something I can pull the cube back out of this thing. I still have my original geometry and I have this little modification that's happening to it. So it's non-destructive. It's not a permanent thing. We can make it permanent, but we'll do that a little bit later on when we take a deeper dive into modeling. I'm going to close this window, this little sandbox window that allows me to experiment with tools. And I'm just going to borrow that subdivision surface generator. I'll create that. I'm going to take my branch and throw my my branch into that. And that's, a little bit closer to what I was going for. I want like another kind of tine for the branch. You can see that I still have a polygon surface selected. What I'm going to do is make sure that I'm in the model mode of the tool. So again, over here on the left side, we're really switching between, we're using the Make Editable button, we're using the Model tool, and then we're looking at points, edges, and polygons. Okay? There's one more tool I want us to look at, and that is the Axis tool. The Axis tool becomes pretty valuable. If I go to the Move tool, okay, and I'm focusing on my branch for a moment here, you'll notice that my branch has its central axis kind of down here towards the bottom, because when we made this shape, this was probably the object was probably like yay big, right? So by default, its axis is at the center of the object, and the axis is an important bit of information. This is the thing that marks its position in space, its axis, okay? It's also the thing, if we go to rotate, it's also the thing that it rotates around, okay? So if I go to the Move tool, and let's say I want this axis to rotate around a different part of the object, what I'll do is I'll temporarily turn on the Axis tool. I'm going to move the axis, and you can see that when I move this, the model, the geometry is not moving, just the axis is. Okay, so once I get it to the position that I want, I moved it down. I'm going to toggle that button back off, and now when I rotate this thing, it's going to rotate around that axis that we just moved. Okay, so I'm going to Command-Z to undo to stand it back up. I may want to take some more time to refine this this branch, but for now, I'm fairly satisfied with it as a rough object for reference. I'm going to go back to my standard setup because I want to add a real simple material. I almost lost focus here, so I'm going to tap the O key. There we go. And I'm going to take this brown material and I'm going to drag and drop it onto the branch object. Okay, this is the same brown I'm using for the hat. I might want to change that later, but for now I think I'm okay with it. So I'm going to move this up. I'll move it over. I'm just kind of orbiting around the snowman to get a better look at this. Now I'll rotate and just kind of put that into the position that I think it should go. Okay. Now I could spend a lot of time playing with this branch to get it where I want it and add more organic quality to it. But you get the idea of how we can start off with a very simple shape and start to model stuff. Okay. So think about some of the other kinds of details that you could add to your snowman with techniques like these. Make a pass and refine the snowman with some other details. Like my snowman, I kind of feel like it needs a mouth, right? Definitely needs some buttons on the front or some kind of detail in the front. And I also want to really think about the environment. So I'm going to present at least 2 more videos in this series. And the next video, I'm going to make a pass at the environment and talk about some basic techniques to really kind of make a more interesting environment based on all of the stuff that we already know and we're experimenting with. And we'll take a look at a few new tools. So we'll add a little simple landscape. We'll add some trees and some other details inside our scene. And then we'll really kind of talk about composing it. We'll make a pass at lighting and really, bring out some details with our composition and our lighting. We'll talk about final renders. And then we just have some time to experiment with these tools and really, look at other things that we might be able to do to add detail to our snowman scene. But we'll push forward. We'll catch up in the next presentation. And in the meantime, just make sure that you play around with the extrusion tool. Okay, as we push forward, make sure that you're posting questions in the discussion board and continuing to post your works in progress. And we'll catch up in the next presentation.